today I'm going to show you how to make a necklace and earring set with the treasure bag. However, if you do not have the Spring Splendor treasure bag, you can still do this. These are basic techniques with basic size, easily found types of beads. And I also discuss some alternatives for some of the ones that are not quite as common, the little crystals I have in here. So I discuss in the next section what you can use instead of what you have in the treasure bag. So stay tuned for that and dig into your stash, and you can do this with me. And so we're making a pair of earrings, and we're making a necklace. And I do have some of these little beads on my website, and I'll post a link for that. We'll talk about that in the next section too. I wanted to say very quickly, thank you everybody for all your condolences and all your nice comments and all your support and everything that you have done since my mother has died. I really appreciate it. Now, I have not kept up well with all the comments on the YouTube channel or on my blog or on the website. I really apologize. For a couple of weeks, I really just didn't feel like doing it. I apologize, but I really, truly appreciate them, and I will eventually respond to everything. And I have started working on some of the comments on the YouTube channels. But anyway, that has to be said. I do appreciate all of you, and I will respond to you, I promise. But anyway, let's go ahead and look and see what it takes to make this little set and get started. Okay, so I'm going to show you what we need to make this cute little necklace. So what we're going to use from your treasure bag, and of course if you don't have a treasure bag, you can use other things that are very similar in shape and size, and you can do this project very easily. So what we're going to be using is, in your treasure bag you have a couple pieces of Figaro chain. Now I have cut 2 3-inch pieces of them for the end of my necklace. Now on Figaro chain you have small links and big links. Just make sure you end on 2 small links or 2 big links, but I'm ending on 2 small links because that way it'll kind of narrow down to my clasping and to my necklace. So on either side. So 2 3-inch pieces of Figaro chain or whatever chain you have on hand. Then I'm using some of these glass rondelles that are in the treasure bag. You can use just a regular 6x4 or 3x4 crystal. It's just crystal rondelle. It's just that these are pretty narrow because they're more saucer shape. So if you use a regular rondelle, it's going to be a little thicker, and you may need to use one less bead in each section, or do one section with less beads than the section before or after. And I'll show you what I mean by that as we're doing this. But in the treasure bag, you have these purple crystals. We'll be using about 42 of them. And you should have plenty, even if you made the other projects that have them in it, or the other necklace, you should still have plenty because there was a lot of beads on that strand. And then I'm using one of the top drilled teardrop shaped crystals, and you can use anything that's top drilled, and I do have some of these on my website, so I will list them, and I will give a link in the description box beneath the video player if you want some of these. They come in really handy. You could also make some wire wrapping. You can put pinch bails on them. You can do a lot of things with these. So I have some of those if you want them. And then we're going to be using some 11-0 seed beads. I have an 11-0 Toho aluminum permanent finish. So it's kind of a silver tone. And then we are going to use one of the clasps that came in the bag. And we're going to use the 10 rectangular shaped crystals that are in the bag. You have 10 purple crystals. Some of them, I just noticed yesterday that when they sent me the crystals, some of them are a little bit more violet and some of them are a little bit more amethyst. So the shade may slightly vary. The ones I have match perfectly with these. The other ones will still be just as pretty. They're just a little bit different shade, which can add a little contrast to your necklace. So if you have a little bit different shade one, don't worry about it. Use it anyway. It'll work fine. Or you could always use like a lavender color crystal like this with them. That will work really good too. Then I'm going to add to the mix 2 wire guardians. I will also show you how to just connect this without a wire guardian if you do not have any, but I'm using 2 small wire guardians, and then I'm using a few size 2 crimp beads. This is Beading size 2, and then I'm using one of the 4mm round beads that came in the treasure bag. If you do not have one of the 4mm round metal spacer beads, silver tone, you can go ahead and just, you don't have to have one, but you can use any bead that will fit over your crimp, and you'll see what I mean by that. You could probably use a 6/0 seed bead. A Toho has a pretty large hole, and you should be able to use it. If not, it's not important. You don't have to have it. You can just leave the crimp bead and put a crimp bead cover over it, or there's lots of options. So don't worry about that if you don't have them, if you're making this just on the technique alone. And then I am going to use some beading wire. I'm going to use Soft Flex Fine. You can use anything that is just small in diameter. So this is a 0.014 in diameter. You could also use some Beading 7. This one here works really good also. So whatever you have on hand, even if you have a medium, it should still work. It's just the fine is going to work better with the seed beads. So that's what I am using. And that's what you're going to need. So let's go ahead and get started with this project. To start this project, you're going to want to cut about 18 inches of your beading wire. Now, this necklace will turn out to be 20 inches. When you want to adjust the length to make it shorter or longer, you can adjust it with your chain portion. So I've cut 3 inches of chain on 2 segments of 3 inches of chain for the back of my necklace. You can make it shorter or longer to adjust the length of your necklace. But this portion is going to be about 14 inches once we've finished. So what we're going to do is, you've cut your wire, go ahead and pick up 4 11/0 seed beads first onto your wire. So I've got my 4 11/0s. I'm just going to drop them down and let them slide over. Then I'm going to pick up my focal bead, my crystal, and I'm going to drop it down. And then I'm going to pick up 3 more 11/0 seed beads onto, or excuse me, 4 more 11/0 seed beads onto my wire and drop them down, just like that. Now let's get you in a little closer, and then we're going to pick up a crimp bead. So I've got a size 2 Beading crimp bead, and I'm just going to put my 2 ends together of my wire, just like this. I'm going to pull this portion of the necklace we've already created down to the center, because if you put these 2 ends together and pull it down, you can center it, and we'll center it even better once we get our crimp tube on. Lay the wires next to each other neatly, don't have them crossing, and then just put them into the crimp tube, keeping them side by side as best you can, and pull that crimp tube down to the 11/0 seed beads like this. And make sure your wire is not crossed inside your crimp tube. So you want to arrange it to where you have your wire parallel to itself inside that crimp tube, not crisscrossed. Scoot it down to the beads, and you're going to have to do this a couple of times because it wants to move around. Scoot it down to the beads to where you still have some movement in your pendant. You don't want your pendant to be really tight, but you don't want a lot of slack or wire showing. Then once you have your wires arranged, split them apart in your finger like this, so that they stay the way you want them. Make sure you don't crisscross them, and then just kind of split them apart like this. This ensures that your necklace is going to lay correctly. Now I know my finger's over the crimp bead, but what's happening is this wire that comes out of this side is on this side, this wire that comes out of this side is on this side, and I'm just holding it all together the best I can. Then I'm going to grab my crimping tool. In this divot the one closest to the handle, you will see there's a little crinkly side and there's a round half moon side. That is the divot you're going to place your crimp tube in. I like to have the flat, you can see how my pliers are shaped. I like to have this flat side closest to my beads, and then I'm just going to place that crimp tube in the middle of that plier. And then you can push down on it if you need to. Hold on to your wires up here and get it back into position, keeping your wires apart so that you get a nice crimp, and then just squeeze. And then I'm just kind of forcing my wires apart to make sure they're in the proper place in the crimp tube here. I'm going to turn this over and show you what I have now. I have a divot in the middle, so it's like a V fold, and I have one wire coming out of one side encased in a little tube, and the other wire coming out of the other side encased in a little tube that's created when you crimp in that first divot. I still have some movement with my pendant, so everything's good. It looks good. Now, I am going to take my crimping tool, and in this first divot closest to the tip of the pliers, you can see when you put it together, it makes a circle. You're going to place that crimp tube sideways in that. So I've got my fold in the middle here. I want to make sure that the tubes that are created on either side of that fold are now touching the sides of that crimp tool in that first divot, and then I'm going to squeeze. Now you've got glass seed beads there, so be careful not to get on them, just on the crimp tube, because you will break them. Now, we need to reduce this so you can see I squished it together, and now I have a really nice crimp. See if I can get you even closer, I don't know, without getting foggy on the camera here, but that's what that should look like. Now I'm going to place it back into that first divot, and I'm going to squeeze it a couple more times, move it around the crimp tube without getting my seed beads, and just reduce the size of this crimp so that I can slide one of my little 4mm rounds around it. Now, if you do not have a 4mm round, you can put a crimp tube cover on this if you'd like. You may want to make sure that you move yours back just a little bit so you have room, but you should be able to put a crimp tube cover on that if you would like. Now, going around it, squeezing it, I'm just reducing the size of it and shaping it into a really round tube. Then I'm going to pick up one of my 4mm round beads. Now, if it doesn't fit over perfectly, some of them have a little bit bigger hole than others. You can choose a different one if you'd like. Or if you have something in your stash that has a decent size hole, or you have a 6/0 something, you can use that. We're going to slide this over both the wires on the ends here, and I'm just going to bring it down and over that crimp tube, and you can see how that fits perfectly over that. Now, if you cannot get it over, like I said, try a different one, or reduce your crimping a little bit more by using your crimp tool. So now I'm just going to spread my wires apart, making sure they're not crisscrossed again. I want everything to be nice and straight, otherwise your necklace isn't going to lay very nicely. So now I have this positioned the way I want it, and I am going to begin beading this. So I'm going to pick up two 11/0 seed beads on either side and drop them down. That just gives some room here where the V is created so that your beads will fit nicely above it, because down here it's very narrow. So you want to use 11/0s down in that area. If you have an issue with that, you can use 15/0s too. But these 11/0s should work fine. They may give you a little resistance, but you can see I have them scooted down to where they're side by side and they're in a perfect position for my necklace to have a nice V shape. Now I am going to do one side here, and then we'll do the other side, and I'll show you basically what I'm going to do, then I'll come back and show you the finished. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pick up one of my crystals, my rectangular shaped crystal. And for this portion, if you don't have these, a 4x8 bicone works beautifully for this, or a rice pearl, anything this shape. You could even probably use a 12x4 if you want it to be even longer, to have a nice narrow shape down here. So you can use other beads that work. A 4x8 bicone works great. I did it last night. It works really good. Then I'm going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead as my spacer, and I'm going to pick up another one of my rectangular crystals, and then an 11/0 seed bead. And then for each section in between this, I am going to pick up 6 of my rondelle beads. So I'll pick up a rondelle. If you're using a wider rondelle, because like I said, these are sasso shaped and they're skinny, you can use, instead of 6, use 5. But otherwise, you can just go ahead and use 6 too. You'll just end up with a longer bottom portion of your necklace. You just want to make sure you have enough wire to do your crimping ends, which you should, but you'll just have to adjust according to what you have to use. And then we're going to pick up between each one, we'll pick up an 11/0 seed bead. So I'll put 6 of these on. See, watching someone string is no fun, is it? Kind of boring. Kind of boring. Come here, you. So now I have 6 of these. And then I'm going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead and then another crystal. Like this. And then an 11/0 seed bead, and then I'll do another section of 6 rondelles. So I have a finished necklace. Let me show you what it will look like so that we can do this and come back pretty well strung, so we can just do the ends. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 2 of our crystals, 6 rondelles with 11/0s in between, an 11/0 a crystal, and then, did I do 6 again? 6 again, and a crystal, 6 again, and a crystal, and 6 again. So basically, you're going to do 4 sections of rondelles and 3 crystals. And then we will be back, and I will show you how to end that side, and then we'll do the other side. Okay, so as you can see, I have strung this entire side of the necklace here, and now we're going to put on our wire guardian and crimp this off and call this end done. If you do not have a wire guardian, then simply drop your first, regardless if you have a wire guardian or not, drop your crimp tube down. If you are going to just put your chain directly on without a wire guardian, make sure your chain is completely closed. That's one of the issues with these twisted links. They're hard to close really tightly. But you want to make sure that's very tightly closed, or you're not going to be successful. Your chain is going to fall off your wire. So you can just drop that straight on there, and then you can go into your crimp tube and pull it through and crimp. If you want to use a wire guardian, then we're just going to put one end of the wire guardian and put the wire through one end of the wire guardian, bring it down, hold on to it, put the other side through the wire guardian, then go through the crimp bead, and you can go through the first bead if you would like to, or you can just go through the wire guardian and cut it off. I like to slide through the first bead if I possibly can, simply because it leaves less of a pokey end on my neck. So I'm going through, get you close. So I'm going through this side of the wire guardian, down into this side, into the crimp tube, into the first bead, and then I'm going to grab the end of the wire that is stable. So one end moves, the other end is stable. I'm going to grab a hold of it, and I'm just going to pull this down. And then I'm going to grab a hold of that first bead and my wire guardian, and I'm just going to bring this down Squeeze my wire guardian in to fit on top of that crimp tube a little bit better. Make sure everything is nice and tight. Try to keep your wire parallel so it's not crossing in there, but if it does cross a little, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And just adjust it until you get it to look nice like this. I don't always use a wire guardian, but because I'm connecting chain and because that chain has a tendency to be difficult to close perfectly, I'm going to go ahead and use the wire guardian. Now, you also want to make sure as you do this, and you're pulling this down, it's nice and tight. It's also nice and tight down here on the focal end of your necklace, because if it is not, if you have slack in this, you are going to end up with a funny looking focal. This is going to hold the focal all together. I'm using soft flex, or even the Beading is flexible enough to where you'll get a little stretch and your beads will have enough room to move around, but you do not want any slack in this whatsoever. So we're going to bring this down, and then we're just going to grab a hold of our crimping tool, and we're going to grab right onto that crimp tube in the second divot, like I showed you previously, exactly flat end towards the bead here. And I'm just going to make sure everything's tight, and I'm going to squeeze. Now you can see I have encased both of my wires perfectly inside there. So this wire is coming out this end, this wire is coming out this end. And because you have the wire guardian on, it helps keep those wires apart and parallel to each other so that you get a nice crimp. Then we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to move into this first divot on our tool, the one closest to the tip of the handle, or tip of the plier. Geez, I cannot speak today. And we're going to place that in there sideways, just like this, so that that fold that we created with the first crimp is in the middle, and the two tubes we created are touching the tool. And then we're just going to squeeze. Now we have a very nice crimp, and we have a wire guardian on the end. Then I'm just going to grab my little flush cutters, and I'm going to get as close to that as I can on the bead there and cut that wire down. So now this is what you should have. This is what this should look like. And that is perfect. I have enough tension all the way down so that everything looks nice up here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other side exactly the same way. So I'll bead it the same way, and I will put the end on the wire guardian on the same way. Now, if you had put your chain on instead of a wire guardian, then of course do that. So as soon as I get the other side completed to this point, I'll be back. So you can see I've done both sides. Now the one thing to watch for when you're crimping is to make sure you don't pull this so tight that one of the 11-O's dislodges the other one and makes it lay above. And what I'm talking about is when you pull, you want to make sure your first side has no slack, but it isn't extremely tight. You don't want your beads squashed on there, just no slack. And then on the second one, you do the same thing. When you're doing it, you don't want to push it so tight that this bead dislodges this bead and moves it up, because you don't want it so tight on there that things don't move a little bit. So when you push this one down, this one's going to move a little if you really attach it really tightly, if you push this really tight. So you want to make sure, like I said, just put it on there, no slack, but don't make it really, really tight. I have the window open. You can hear the dog next door. I'm sorry. He has a really deep bark. So now that I've put both of my wire guardians on the ends, I have my center situated really pretty. I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm going to grab one of my pieces of chain. Now, like I said before, if you're using the stuff in the box, it is a figure row chain, so you've got little ones and big links. So I've ended to make sure I have the little links on both sides here. And then I'm going to grab one of my pairs of pliers here. I'm going to use my chain nose pliers on both sides, and I'm just going to open this by twisting it. Let me get you in closer So I've just opened this. Now, these links are kind of hard to deal with because they're a twisted link. So when you close it, it's always kind of a pain in the rear end. So you're better off with 2 chain nose, but if you have your flat nose and your chain nose, it will work. And then just close it back and make sure you get it closed properly. Like I said, with a twisted link, it's a little bit harder to do. So I hope I was in camera, but I'm going to go ahead and do that again to connect it to the necklace. So basically what I did was twist my little link open, put it on the end, put it on the toggle. I am so sorry. I cannot get my tongue to work today. And then we're going to open this end. So let me see if I stay in camera now. I'm going to back up just slightly. And I'm just going to twist this open. So just a twisting motion. I'm going to pop it on here. And then I'm going to close it again. This will ensure that your necklace stays together better. If you just pull the chain through with these twisted links, you can't get the link shut really tight, then your beading wire is going to fall through and the back of your necklace is going to fall apart. So with a wire guardian, it works a lot better. However, you can do it the other way. I've done it the other way a million times. You just really have to ensure that your chain is closed tightly, or use a different chain than a twisted link and you can get it closed really tightly, or use a jump ring. You can do that also. So anyway, you can use a really heavy gauge jump ring, attach that, and then attach your chain to the jump ring. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I went ahead and already put my toggle on there. So I'm just going to open this and put it on this end. Really simple, fast moving project, and it just turns out really, really cute. I'm going to open this and see if I have that open enough. Yes. And close it. And now, my dearies, we have an adorable necklace. And you see, when you have your tension correctly and everything, it will lay really nicely. You'll have a little bit of movement with your crystal. This part will have a little bit of movement. And as you wear it, it will stretch just slightly and give a nice shape because of the soft flex or the bead-alon. It will actually kind of acclimate to the shape it's in. So let's get you close. Let you see what it looks like. Of course, wash your crystals. You know, just take a microfiber or something and wipe them down because they're always dirty, and I always get my oils that I use on my hands and my lotions and stuff all over them. And it will be really pretty once you wash it up, and that's what that looks like. I think it turned out just adorable. And the one I made previously, I did try on, and it lays really nicely. So that's how you make that necklace. Okay, so now I want to show you how to make a matching earring. This is a really simple process to make this. Really cute. It's a long dangle. This is what it looks like. So we're just going to make a component in the middle and attach our drop with a jump ring. So what you're going to need is you're going to have to double this, of course, because I've already made one, so I'm just showing you enough for one earring. You're going to need 3 of your little purple rondelles and 2 of your spacer beads, 1 about 8mm round jump ring, and you don't want it to be a really heavy gauge simply because it won't fit through your bead very well. So you want to make sure that it's a 20-22 gauge, something like that. And then a ear wire and 1 of your drops. Now I'm using, in your treasure bag you got 2 different colors of drops. They're really close in color, but one's more purplish than the other. It's called Mauve by the manufacturer. I'm using that one. The other one will work just as well and be just as pretty, and I have a bunch of the other one on the website, really pretty ones. So if you want to make something like this, then of course you can. And you can also use like one of these type of rondelles for this as a replacement, just like you could in the necklace. you're going to need a little bit more space because they're a little wider, but that's the only difference. I've cut 2 inches, actually about 2¼ inches of 22 gauge wire. You can also use a head pin or an eye pin and just cut the ends off and use it if you would like. And I'm using artistic wire, 22 gauge. This works a little bit better. Head pins are sometimes a little stiff to work with depending upon your head pin. So then we are going to go ahead and put this together. So this is what we're going to do. Let me move this stuff out of the way. The first thing we're going to do is we're just going to place our focal bead onto our jump ring. So all you have to do is grab a pair or 2 of pliers here. I'm going to use a flat nose and a straight nose. And I'm going to grab on the side of where the opening is in my jump ring. Let me rearrange here so I can get in camera. So here's the opening of my jump ring. I'm holding one side with my chain nose, and then with my flat nose I'm going to just open that by twisting it, just like that. Never pull it open, just twist it. And you're going to want to twist it pretty wide because you have to get this big old bead on here. And then you're just going to put that through the hole of the bead, like that. Grab a hold of it again. Whoops. And of course I'm out of camera, so let me put that back on there. You just slide it on like that. And then close your jump ring exactly the way you opened it. Make sure you get it closed nice and tightly. You can shimmy it a little bit until it actually closes well, like this. And then just set that aside. Grab your piece of wire. Like I said, this is about 2¼ inches, and I'm going to go about 3/4 of an inch, almost an inch down here. And I am going to bend this over the top. Now I'm staying towards the very narrow part of my pliers because I want to make a small loop, and I want to have enough wire left over here to wrap a couple of times around, coil around. So now I'm just going to turn my wrist until my pliers are now vertical. They're up and down compared to the bead mat here. And I'm just going to hold it on the narrow part of my pliers, and I'm going to bring this extra piece of wire on the other side over those pliers. I'm going to turn my wrist a little bit and make my hand parallel to the bead mat while drawing this little piece of wire down. So this is what I have. I'm going to take this off. This is what I have. Now I'm going to grab my flat nose pliers. I'm going to hold on to that loop, and then I'm going to move this little extra piece in the same angle as the pliers here. So I'm just moving it up so that it's straight, parallel to the pliers. Then I'm going to switch hands because I wrap better with my right hand. Now you can do this with your fingers if you'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and use a little pair of pliers, and I'm just going to coil around this wire twice. And I have just about the right amount just to bring this down and tuck it on. I'm going to straighten that up a little. And I'm just going to tuck this down. You can trim it off if you have a little bit more than I did. Or you can just tuck it in if I can. If it wants to twist. Oops. Get back in camera. Jeez Louise. Okay, now I've got it tucked in. So coil around, and I'll show you the other end again in case I was out of camera, and I'll back off a little bit so that doesn't happen. So I've got a loop with a coil here. I'm going to pick up one of my 4mm round beads here, and then I'm going to pick up my 3 rondelles. Come here. I choked on my water. Now my throat is bothering me. I apologize. Once you choke, then your throat is messed up all day long. So this is what I have now. Let me back off just slightly here. And now my loop is this way, so I'm going to place my pliers to where my next loop will be in the same direction. Of course, you can turn them if you need to, so that's not that critical. But I like to try to wrap it the same way as the previous one. Again, stay to the narrow portion of your pliers. Try to stay in the same place, as you did your previous one, and then bend. So I'm holding my pliers like parallel to my bead mat, and I'm going to bend this over the back portion of my plier. Then I'm going to turn my wrist so that my pliers are now vertical to the bead mat, and then I'm going to bring this piece over. As I get to the side here, I'm going to bring it under, and I'm going to turn my wrist parallel to the bead mat so that I make a loop like that. And then I am going to grab my flat nose pliers again. You can use chain nose, doesn't truly matter. Then I'm going to adjust this extra piece so that it is in the same angle as my pliers. I'm going to switch my hands, and then I'm going to coil this end 2 times. 1. I'm going to go 2 complete times all the way around. Like that. This is what you should have. And then I'm going to cut this off. And tuck that little extra piece in the best I can here. And now, like I said before, if your loops aren't the same, mine are the same direction, you can take your pliers and turn them. But I'm just straightening mine out so that they're not all weird. And then straighten my little component out, because sometimes you bend the wire on the inside. And then all I have to do is take my ear wire, open it by twisting it open just like we did the jump ring, just like that. Drop this on here, and I'm actually going to use my other chain nose here, and I'm going to close this just like I opened it in the opposite direction, like that. Now I've got that on there. That's one's cut weird. I may have to get a different air wire, but let's see if I can get it closed. There we go. That's better. Now that little bead slid down over it. And let me back up because I really don't know if I'm in camera or not, and I apologize. Okay, so now I have to find the opening of my jump ring here on my bead and open it again. Slide it on to my component and close it again. Of course, you can do that all in one. You don't have to prepare it first so that you don't have to open and close it twice. That's fine. You can do your component, your bead on your jump rings, at the same time you're going to connect it. That's fine too, of course. And now, wipe off my beads. They're getting all grody looking. Now I have a set of earrings, and I have a very pretty necklace. And let me back off so you can actually see it. That's what that set looks like. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Go ahead and get you out some beads. You don't have to have the treasure bag. Use what you've got. The techniques are basic and they should work with most anything. All you have to do is adjust lengths, modify slightly, and you can do the same necklace. Bye-bye.